So you found the skeleton. How would you tell people that this is you personally? How would you decide?
Well, interesting question. I don't know. I'd have to do some research on that.
All right, everybody, welcome to Kent with Bent pre-recorded number 3. We are, in fact, doing this pre-recorded because, well, basically, we're trying to take a little bit of a break. We're having someone visit, and so, wanted to have this so that on the Tuesday that this would normally air, we don't have to be quite so busy. I might still be checking chat. Actually, I'll almost certainly still be checking chat, but that's okay, and we will try to collect any and all super chats and read them out during my next live stream, which should be either the Saturday following when this premieres or the next Tuesday after that. So if you do want to super chat, we will collect those and read them out. But anyway, we are continuing with 100 Reasons Why Evolution is So Stupid by Kent Hovind. But before we do, let us start getting into some of the drinking rules, because this is in fact a bit of a drinking game. We have some rules. One of them is that we will drink whenever Kent Hovind gets something right without it being something that he is just quoting from someone else. So if he just gets the science correct, we take a drink. We also take a drink whenever it's just so stupid we just can't, because that'll happen a lot. Whenever Kent Hovind tells a joke that doesn't land, we'll take a drink. If one of us guesses correctly what the next thing is that's going to be coming, where there's some like controversy about what it's going to be, we take a drink for that. Let's see. We take a drink for hashtag shower thoughts. Oh! We take a drink for Godzilla whenever he shows up. There's our first drink. So, we also take a shot for the hashtag shower thoughts that Kent Hovind has that he thinks are real conversations or something. We usually just call it things that didn't happen, because Kent Hovind likes to tell stories about things that allegedly happened that totally didn't happen. Oh, and there's Mothra. We take a drink for Mothra, too. All right, so I am ready to get going. Are you, Bent?
Well, yes, but I do need you to screen share Kent with me.
Oh, I do need to do that. That is true.
That's why I was trying to do this earlier.
Oh, my goodness.
Okay, that's fine. Oh.
Okay.
All right, and I say we go for it.
Let me double check to make sure everyone is seeing what they should.
But yeah.
Oh, wait, you know what? I just realized they can't see the blanket. So I'm going to have to fix that real quick.
Oh.
There we go.
Okay.
One single cell is more complex than a space shuttle. There's no such thing as a primitive single-celled organism. We talk about that on video number 4 of our series.
So
that doesn't follow.
Yeah, so here's the thing, right? Primitive in the sense of evolutionary biology basically means more ancestral in terms of its actual just function and morphology and physiology and whatnot, right? So you could say that, say, overall, say, orangutans are probably more basal than say, humans, right? Because generally speaking, the default for hominids is longer arms, being arboreal, stuff like that, right? Having the divergent big toe, the bigger canines, the sort of square jawline instead of the parabolic ones that humans have. All those are really weird diverged traits in humans. Similarly, you could say that, like, say, iguanas aren't terribly derived when compared to, like, actual geckos, like, unlike most lizards, geckos don't have eyelids, they have weird setae that let them stick to glass, they have all sorts of weird adaptations to go along with that, whereas, oh, there's Mothra. Whereas, most lizards, like iguanas, they have eyelids, they don't have weird toe panels that use, like, quantum mechanics to stick to things, stuff like this, right? So there are more and less primitive unicellular organisms. The more primitive ones are just the ones that have fewer derived features. However, it is also the case that there are no current organisms that closely resemble what would likely have been the first life, or even, the universal last common ancestor. So, yeah. You have anything, or we want to hit play on that?
Yeah, go for that.
He says, all the forms of life are descended from a common ancestor found in a population of primitive unicellular organisms. What were those first cells like? How do we know? What events led up to their formation? No traces of those events remain. Did you catch that? Hey kid, we know what happened, but there's no proof. Primitive.
What traces would you expect to happen of a singular event somewhere deep in the past? I mean, it's sort of like, you know, all traces of the evidence of Kent Hovind's great-great-grandmother being born are lost to us. I think we still have...
For someone who thinks in the beginning God created the heavens and the earth is enough of an explanation as to how the universe came to be, it seems pretty weird to me that this explanation for unicellular life, the common ancestor of all of us, that can't fathom that.
Yeah, is that really much more far-fetched? Especially since we know that chemistry works. Oh, yeah. All right, here we go.
Huh? This one says, the humans, mammals, birds, crocodiles, all had a common ancestor.
I do not like this chart. Yeah, no. This is really bad. It's got like everything just coming out of a reptilia base node, and then turtles are in the wrong place. Snakes should be coming out from within lizards, not before lizards. Plesiosaurs and ichthyosaurs are not in a terrible place, although plesiosaurs should be closer to turtles than to ichthyosaurs, and really they should both be closer to archosaurs, which we kind of have. And then some dinosaurs are less closely related to other dinosaurs than pterosaurs, and that pterosaur doesn't look like a pterosaur. I don't even know what's happening with those pterosaurs. This is a terrible chart.
Why does it have dinosaurs and then birds and then dinosaurs again?
Because this chart is crazy talk.
Like, okay.
And apparently mammals are closer to amphibians than they are to turtles, which is completely false. Yeah, this is terrible. I'm sorry, Heath Biology 1991, but if Kent Hovind wants to say that this is a stupid chart, I'm actually going to agree. Probably for different reasons. But yeah, this is terrible.
Well, anything inside that circle is religious speculation.
That's the idea, is that it's not terrible at all for the reason Ken thinks it is.
Exactly, because it's not religious speculation. First of all, dinosaurs, pterosaurs, plesiosaurs. Oh, drink from Mothra. I might have to fix that a little bit, because Mothra's going a little crazy. But, like, we actually have organisms that fill in a lot of the detail here. Now, when you actually draw a cladogram, as I've stated many times on the channel, one of the things is that you don't actually put known taxa at the nodes. You literally can't, because the way that we do the math on these, basically, is that drink from Mothra one more time. So the way that we do the math on this is basically whatever taxa you include, no matter how long ago they lived or where they lived or anything like that, they all go in as taxa to be evaluated as endpoints on a tree, right? Which means none of them can be node points on a tree, even if in reality they were. So even if we knew for certain, say, that this particular organism was the common ancestor of all dinosaurs, right? So it's the common ancestor of Brachiosaurus and Triceratops and the hummingbird. We know for a fact it is. When you plug it into the programs that we use to run the numbers to actually come up with a phylogenetic tree, it will still come out as the most basally branching member of the entire group, right? It will not come out as the node because it literally can't. The computer is disallowed from doing that by the kinds of math that it's doing. Now, I don't want to get into the exact numbers there because it's kind of complicated and I don't fully understand it either. But you're assessing different trees via different methods like least changes, Bayesian inference, highest probability, things like this, right? And then you come up with a chart. So it's true that when you say that, yeah, you can't put any of the tips into a node, but that is not because the nodes quote-unquote have no data. It's just that the data is based on the taxa that you include. And so you're trying to come up with the most likely tree. And you're never going to be 100% sure, but you get pretty good. And the thing is that creationists themselves will use similar techniques within what they think of as kinds, which they never really define very well. But they'll try to say, okay, well, how do all of the canids relate to each other? You know, like, what was the first split between the canids? Was it the maned wolf on one side and everything else on the other? Or was it maybe, like, the fox on one side and everything else on the other? What about in, like, Caninae, the actual, you know, genus Canis? Is the dhole closely related to genus Canis? You know, all these questions, right? They'll use the same techniques that standard evolution use, or sometimes they'll use somewhat outdated techniques that lead to basically the same results. But then you get to higher taxa and they just don't bother trying. Weird that. But actually, there is a paper I want to talk about soon on the channel that was some scientists used the creationist cladistic methods to come up with a cladogram that included birds in with dinosaurs, which is something that, you know, creationists don't like. They came to the conclusion that based on creationist methods, all of Dinosauria is a single kind. So Triceratops is the same kind as a hummingbird. Yeah. So here we go.
It is stupid. Reptiles produce reptiles, dogs produce dogs, people produce people, and there's never been an exception to that. Darwin said, though, if...
I will agree, there has never been an exception to the fact that when animals reproduce, they reproduce another animal of the same species as they are. Evolution doesn't say anything different. It says that over time, groups of populations in the same species will diverge, and that species will then become a clade into which both new species exist. And then as those species go on to diverge again and again, the clade will remain a clade.
So if a dog always produces a dog, and a person always produces a person, etc., then things are bringing forth after their own kind, I would think, even in Kent's way of thinking about it.
But even
it doesn't like it.
So like right now there are this population of wolves called sea wolves, and they spend more than half, actually I think it's close to 2/3 of their time in the water. They get 90+% of their calories from aquatic food, right? So let's say this population persists and it becomes more and more aquatically adapted until it's no less aquatic than, say, a dolphin. It'll still be a wolf. Even if it loses all of its hair and turns into a bullet-shaped swimming animal that never comes ashore, still a wolf.
If my theory be true, here's his book right here. You can look on page 211.
What's that? Sorry.
Just like I'm still a fish.
Yes. If you want to use fish as a taxonomic term, then yeah, all tetrapods end up being fish.
He said, if my theory be true, numberless intermediate varieties must assuredly have existed. Oh, you're right about that, Charlie. I mean,
yeah, I agree.
To change from a rock to a dog would take a few changes.
Take a drink for rock to anything. So I don't know that I have to super explain this to the audience, but yeah. Nowhere in abiogenesis research will you find anyone saying that a rock turned into a living organism. Sometimes some chemicals that were contained in the rocks, but were not themselves rocks, are thought to have helped with the process. And other times the rocks provide a location for chemical processes to occur, but neither of those is the same as the rock turning into a living thing.
David Ropp, who believes in evolution very strongly, says, in the years after Darwin, his advocates hoped to find predictable progressions. In general, these have not been found, yet the optimism has died hard, and some pure fantasy has crept into textbooks.
So maybe in 1981 that might be true, but now we have actually very good transitional sequences for many organisms. We have, like, you go to mammals, we have excellent transitional fossils from more basal hominids, close to the common ancestor between Homo and Pan, all the way through to modern hominids. We have essentially an unbroken chain. You can basically look for any predicted morphology between, that basal Homo Pan common ancestor and modern humans, and there's a fossil for it. We have an excellent transitional fossil record for primitive camelids diverging from other artiodactyls like cervids and bovids, and camelids becoming more and more like modern camels as they move around from North America into South America and into Asia. We have an excellent fossil record now for whales, which was completely absent when I was, growing up, but now it is very well documented. If you go into dinosaurs, we have an excellent fossil record for Tyrannosauroids, Neoceratopsian, Paravians, like Humaniraptorans and things like that. We have excellent fossil records for all of these groups. We even have a pretty good fossil record for many groups of turtles and sort of testudines, which are things that include not quite turtles that are closely related. We now have a pretty decent, not amazing, but pretty decent fossil record for the evolution of snakes from lizards that probably looked a lot like modern monitor lizards. We have a very good fossil record for the evolution of mosasaurs from land lizards. We don't have every step of the way there, but we have some very much more basal mosasaurs who are hard to distinguish from terrestrial lizards, all the way up to, like mosasaurs or tylosaurs, which were just monstrous, clearly aquatically adapted lizards. We even have some sort of like proto-ichthyosaurs. We basically have an ichthyosaur seal. It comes on, we know it would be coming on land frequently, but it was still spending most of its time in the water and was beginning to look sort of fishy. I mean, like, it just keeps on going. We've recently filled in a lot of the more primitive turtles, including not just the recent ones. I mean, it just keeps on going. We're finding Cretaceous members of modern bird groups. So now we have Cretaceous Galoancerae, which is the group of chickens and ducks and whatnot. We're getting even possibly some neo-avians in the Cretaceous. Oddly enough, we still don't have any known Cretaceous paleognaths, although we know they had to have been there. But we even have transitional forms for the split between frogs and salamanders, going from basal wasps into ants, going from basal wasps into bees, because bees and ants are both just groups of wasp. Look, I don't want to keep going because I could keep going, naming things for which we have a solid fossil record with actual intermediates. But I think you get what I'm saying, right? We do. You can just keep listing them. I could stay here for a long time listing more and more taxa for which we have a good solid fossil basis that meets the prediction of evolution. But I'll also say that evolution manages to predict where you will find transitional fossils and what they're likely to look like. So, while it's perhaps not the best example, it's famous, so I'll mention it. Tiktaalik was predicted. It was predicted about where it should occur in terms of where in the world, what rock layer in terms, which tells you what time it should be, and it was predicted roughly what the anatomy should be. And all of those predictions were met when they found Tiktaalik rosier. But the thing is, Tiktaalik isn't unusual. Generally speaking, every time someone goes looking for a particular fossil, they're basing their assumption that they're going to find it on evolution. And when they find it, that is in fact a verified prediction, because they usually find what they're looking for. So, yeah. All right, here we go.
Oh, you're kidding. Fantasy in our textbooks? Oh, yep. They tell the kids they have evidence of evolution from fossils. I don't think so.
Oh, I'm glad you don't think so, Kent.
That is stupid, okay? If you find a fossil in the dirt, all you know is it died.
Okay, let's take a drink. And then let's go into some things that you can tell from a fossil besides that it died.
I'll tell you what I know from it based on remembering us covering this a bunch of times already.
Okay, what you got for us?
You know that it lived,
Mm-hmm.
you know that it had parents, and you know that its parents reproduced. That's all I can remember.
Yep, which also means it was part of a species. It wasn't a unique
population.
Yep.
Right?
You can also tell
at least two parents and itself.
Yep. You can also tell if it sustained any injuries in its life that affected the fossilized parts. So, for instance, if a dinosaur broke a rib, you'll be able to tell because the rib will have a scar and clear evidence of healing. I've seen it in person, in actual fossils. It's pretty cool. You can see a little bump of bone. You can tell if, in some cases, depending on the organism, you might be able to tell if it's female. You might even be able to tell if it's successfully mated in some cases. We know of certain Tyrannosaurus specimens that we know successfully mated. We don't know if they reproduced, but we know they mated and became gravid, which is what you call it when non-mammals are carrying fertilized embryos.
But how would you tell if the fossil you found was a dinosaur or not?
Oh, well, that's a separate question that we might get into if Kent Hovind messes it up.
Dino gets it wrong.
Right. But you can also tell in many cases what part of the family tree of life it came from. So, for instance, with dinosaurs, you can look at the diagnostic criteria for, say, Sauropsida, it's got them, Diapsida, got them, Archosauria, got them, Dinosauria, got them, Theropoda, which in this case we'll use the T-Rex, got them, Coelurosauria, yep, Tyrannosauridea, yep, Tyrannosauridae, yep, Tyrannosaurinae, yep. Now you know that you're dealing with a Tyrannosaurine Tyrannosaurus, or Tyrannosaur. It might be Tarbosaurus or Tyrannosaurus, because those are the two main genera in Tyrannosaurine or Tyrannosaurinae. Yeah, you can tell all these things. You can usually tell more or less what it ate based on its anatomy and its dentition, how much gut space it had, whether its teeth were good for shearing flesh or for grinding plants. You can often tell what kind of environment it died in based on the surrounding matrix of the rock. So, for instance, if the surrounding matrix is, say, a turbidite, it probably died in a landslide or a flood. If it's fine-grained shale without evidence of flocculation, it probably died and then sank to the bottom of an anoxic lake, like you get in the Solnhofen limestones, Lagerstätte. There's all of these things, right, that you can tell from a fossil, other than that it died. So, we'll keep going then.
You don't know that it had any kids.
True, I'll take a drink.
And you sure
Yeah, you don't need to, but we'll get into that in a bit.
don't know that it had different kids.
It almost certainly didn't, except in the normal way, in that every kid has mutations that were not present in either parent.
I mean, think about it. You're in a court of law. You bring in a bone to the judge. Judge, I found this bone in the dirt. This is the ancestor of all the humans today.
No one is actually doing that in the professional literature. Now, I do recognize that pop sci articles will be, they're looking for catchy headlines, right? They want to grab your attention. So when they put
creationist pop sci articles.
Oh, well, they are also trying to catch your attention.
Like this is the level of what Kent's
basically
sources seem to be, although I can't confirm. I know his one source was from 1981 and the next one was 1991, but I don't know if those particular textbooks are, YEC textbooks or not.
They weren't, I don't think. But so when you actually read paleontology papers or paleoanthropology papers or whatnot, they're usually much more cautious about their claims, and they might make the claim that something represents an anatomy predicted for the common ancestor. So what evolution is basically saying is, okay, let's assume, based on the theory of evolution, that something with anatomy X eventually evolved into something with anatomy Y, right? So for humans, we'll say something with an anatomy that was very similar to, say, a chimpanzee evolved into a human. Now, we should expect to see in the fossil record organisms at the time that we think would make sense for this transition that have anatomy that is either mosaic or intermediate. And by intermediate, we mean, chimpanzees have a very square jawline. Humans have a very parabolic jaw. And then I'm talking about the teeth, right? The arrangement of the teeth. So you'd expect to see some hominid fossils where the jawline is intermediate. There's still sort of a corner turned at the canine teeth, but it's smoother. It's a smoother transition. You find that. You expect to see hominids going forward in time getting bigger and bigger brain cases. You do find it. And the thing is, if the evolution were not true, you could not point to any organisms, whether living or extinct, and say we should expect to find an intermediate between them somewhere in the fossil record. You couldn't make that prediction. And the prediction ultimately would probably be that such an animal will never be found. But then when it is, and it was done as a prediction of evolution, that is, per se, evidence of evolution. Because you wouldn't expect it to be true if evolution weren't true. Now, did you find the actual direct ancestor? Probably not. But there'd be no reason to expect an animal with that anatomy to exist at all, unless this evolutionary transition happened. So, you ready to hit play?
Yeah.
They would laugh at you.
Okay.
You don't know that that's the ancestor of anybody, do you?
And it doesn't matter, because we're not trying to make sure that we find the exact ancestor, because it's not important. It'd be nice, but it's not actually very important.
It's not that.
And why on earth would you think a bone in the dirt can do something animals today cannot do? Animals today can only produce the same kind, right?
As did animals in the past.
Dogs produce dogs, folks. Luther Sunderland asked all the major evolutionists, he said, where is the evidence for evolution? They all said...
All of the major evolutionists. I would like to know what that list is and what the criteria are to become a major evolutionist. Because that sounds made up to me.
Yeah.
Think about it in any case.
As if Roochbet, Dutchbet, that didn't happen.
Let's say, you want to puke for that, huh?
I think he's making it up.
So it's a weird thing. Like, let's say I said, let's survey all the major auto mechanics. Like, who would that be?
It would be me making something up. I surveyed all the major auto mechanics, and
Yeah.
he said this thing that I think that's stupid.
Exactly. But let's see what he has. Let's see what the results were.
Well, somebody else has it. We don't have it over here. So he wrote.
No, that's not what anyone who was an evolutionary biologist would say. I can guarantee you find a biologist or a geologist or anyone who has a scientific discipline has something to do with the theory of evolution, and ask them, what evidence for evolution do you see in your field? And they will have an answer for you that isn't, oh, I don't know, someone else has it. I mean, we can give some examples. So if you go to, say, virology, it's very easy. We see viruses evolve before our eyes into new viruses that can infect entirely new hosts, have brand new biochemical functions, completely new proteins, and all of this stuff, right, rapidly. So there's evidence for evolution right there. If you go to, say, organismal biology, like Jackson Wheat likes to go to, you can see the patterns of evolution and deeply homologous structures and things like that in the anatomy of essentially any organisms you look at, and then their close relatives. Look in paleontology. I mean, like we already said, there are just reams of lists of transitional fossils between groups, organisms found in the predicted place based on evolution as the sort of guiding principle for how to go search for fossils. If you look at genetics, you can see that the genome creates a clearly nested hierarchy. You can trace mutations through lineages. You can find things like all monkeys, including humans, have the same broken vitamin C gene, the gulosudogene. But then mice also can't produce their own vitamin C, and they also have a gulosudogene, but it's broken in a different way than it's broken in all monkeys. There's no reason to expect that. You can find common ERVs across, that's endogenous retroviruses. It's a viral genome inserted into the genome of an organism. You can find those that you can build a nested hierarchy with that matches other genetic hierarchies. You can do the same thing with mitochondrial DNA. They all match up. If you go to geology, you'll find that while they might not deal with evolution per se, they do rely on things like index fossils, which themselves show in many cases extremely fine transitions. Like if you go look at coccoliths, which are these tiny little marine algae that make shells out of what's essentially glass, you'll find that they transition extremely finely up through layers of things like limestone, and that's right there, just its own evidence for evolution, as well as supporting evidence for things like the age of the Earth, because just to go figure out where to drill for petroleum, you need to know things like how old certain formations are, and it's actually important that the Earth be as old as we think it is for Finches modeling to work, which is the type of modeling that petroleum exploration geologists do. So yeah, I don't need to keep going, I think. But yeah, everyone in every field that touches on evolution has their own evidence that they will list for you if you really want them to.
And the top ones don't know any of it, apparently.
Yeah, apparently, yeah. The top evolutionists, they don't know. But everyone else
top
does.
creationist, Kent Hovind, also doesn't know how to recognize a dinosaur based on a skeleton.
Yeah, that's true. I asked him directly, and he couldn't actually identify a dinosaur from a skeleton. And I've also heard him call the skeleton of a mosasaur a zeuglodon, which is an old name for an extinct whale that's no longer, it's a junior synonym for an extinct whale. So Kent Hovind apparently can't tell the difference between whales, lizards, and dinosaurs. He thinks those are all the same thing, I guess.
Letter to Colin Patterson. He's the director of the British Museum of Natural History. They've got the largest fossil collection in the world. He said, Mr. Patterson, I read your book on evolution. I noticed you didn't show us the missing links. Why didn't you show us the missing links? Patterson wrote back and said, I fully agree with your comments on the lack of evolutionary transitions in my book. If I knew of any, fossil or living, I would certainly have included them. I will lay it on the line. There is not one such fossil.
Ooh, okay, so here's a little clever thing. This is not actually the quote. There's a missing ellipsis. You want to guess where it is?
Where is it?
Right after the word any. After the word any in the original quote are the words, for which an airtight case could be made. If you actually read the entire letter from Dr. Patterson, what's actually being said is, the reason that I didn't put any fossils at the nodes, basically, and I'm paraphrasing here, obviously, because I'm not going to read the whole letter, is because I don't know for a fact that any fossils were actually the transition, the actual ancestor between the groups, because I can't make an airtight case. That's all he's saying. He's saying the exact same thing I said when I said, yeah, even if we found the exact ancestor, it wouldn't end up in a node on any of our cladograms or phylogenetic trees, because that's not how we do cladistics and phylogenetics. That's all that's happening here. So Kent Hovind is not just quote mining, he's also misquoting because he's leaving out the ellipsis. So, yeah.
He says, I will lay it on the line. There is not one such fossil for which one might make a watertight argument.
Oh, watertight argument. All right, yeah.
Um,
Sorry, I was going from memory.
The reason is that statements about ancestry and descent are not applicable in the fossil record, and then he goes on and on.
Yeah. So, what do you know? Kent Hovind quote mining someone from 1988.
There are no missing links, folks. No chain is missing.
No.
Even
missing.
I also really hate the phrase missing link, because one, it implies that whatever the thing is missing, and two, it implies that if we find something, it will always be the direct ancestor of something today.
Well, if you find something and it's a missing link, then it's no longer a missing link. What about all the missing links?
Yeah.
Right? So it's just always going to be until you can make every animal that ever died skeleton appear.
Which is unlikely, yeah.
Even Gould admitted the absence of fossil evidence for intermediary stages is a persistent and nagging problem for evolution.
Okay, let's take a drink for quoting Stephen Jay Gould complaining about gradualism in support of punctuated equilibrium and pretending that he's complaining about evolution as a whole. Oh, you know what's hidden in the ellipsis there? Gradualistic accounts of. A nagging problem for gradualistic accounts of evolution. What Stephen Jay Gould is complaining about here, also, I still don't know why he's a Marxist professor. I've actually never heard any evidence that Stephen Jay Gould was a Marxist. And it's really weird that Kent is like, who's a Marxist, guys? Especially since Marxists don't actually have a great history of being pro-evolution, but whatever. Anyway, so of course, Stephen Jay Gould, as always, is complaining that basically it's hard to find transitions basically at levels around family and like smaller, right? So it's very hard to find transitional fossils between two species in the fossil record. But between, say, two families or two orders, it's actually pretty easy. And he took this as evidence for his idea of punctuated equilibrium. Now, in the subsequent years, we actually have found better evidence of transitions between fossils, even in some large animals, like Neoceratopsians have a very smooth gradient. But also in many things like algae, coccoliths, like I mentioned before, things like that. We actually do have some pretty smooth transitions. But basically, yeah, Stephen Jay Gould was basically saying, yeah, sure, it's great that we have a transition between, say, primitive, say, amniotes and modern mammals, right? In, say, the Therapsid series going through into cynodonts and, up into Mammaliformes and stuff like that. But what about the transition between coyotes and wolves? Or between, like, two different centrosaurine ceratopsians, or between two different species of Gomphotherium in Proboscideans. Where are those transitions? And the answer remains that we don't have very many transitions at that level. And so Stephen Jay Gould's idea was that at certain points, populations could become isolated, relatively small populations, rapidly evolve, and because they're evolving relatively rapidly, we wouldn't expect to see their fossils, and then they may reinvade the original territory of the ancestor species, which still has organisms that are morphologically similar to the ancestor population. And then it will seem like a new species simply appeared on the scene. Now, this has been something that at first was pretty contentious, but now it's generally considered to be something that at least explains some aspects of evolution. It doesn't always happen, but we'll hit a play on this.
We got the theory, we know it's true, now we just need the evidence. That's the way they think about it.
Nope. The evidence had already come in favor of universal common descent, which is what Kent is ultimately objecting to here. And what was trying to be explained by Stephen Jay Gould was an odd pattern in the fossil record at a certain taxonomic level, basically around genus. Come on.
Richard Goldschmidt said, maybe
according to an article he wrote.
His father was a Marxist?
Yes, but he was not, according to the Wikipedia.
Well, let's take a drink for false accusations of Marxism.
The Wikipedia said he leaned slightly left of center in his political, for whatever that was at the time.
Well, at the time, that would basically make him...
I don't...
The time was in the mid-'80s. Right now, he would probably be considered pretty far right now.
Pretty far right, extreme... Yeah, I don't know if that...
No, I don't know about extreme, but that would probably put him, like, in line with, like, Mitt Romney today.
Maybe.
The first bird hatched from a reptile egg.
Okay. I mean, yeah, 1940. I'm sure some guy in the material basis of evolution said something stupid in 1940, but this is not punctuated equilibrium. This is what's called saltation, which is a major evolutionary change that drastically alters the morphology of an organism in a single generation. And that's not how anyone currently thinks of evolution. Oh, drink full Mothra.
Punctuated equilibrium developed in 1972.
So wait, not 1940?
By Stephen Jay Gould and Niles L. Drew. I was reading while you were going on.
Yeah, no worries. But what year was it again?
Yeah, 1972.
So not 1940.
Stephen Jay Gould was born September 10th, 1941.
Okay, so this was before Stephen Jay Gould, who helped create it.
Someone wrote this.
Yeah, and now we're just labeling it punctuated equilibrium.
And then to co-develop the theory. Punctuated. Yeah.
Well, maybe. Also, it's not Goldschmidt. I'm pretty sure it's Goldschmidt.
What did I say?
No, Kent has it listed as Goldschmidt.
Oh, okay.
Kent is double wrong here, basically.
He also spelled Patterson's name wrong.
Did he really?
Well, when I typed it in, there were 2 T's. Google's like, there's 2 T's in this. But anyway.
So, Kent, getting your citations right is the absolute barest minimum. And in this, you've been so bad at it that it's hard to conclude that you're not being fraudulent. Because if I submitted a paper that was cited like this, I would not just get an F. I might be investigated for cheating. I'm serious. And this is just undergrad.
Yeah.
If during my undergrad degree I had made citations that were this bad and this inaccurate, there is a chance I would be thrown out for violating academic ethical standards.
Yeah, you couldn't defend them the way Kent does and, like, get adequate grades in those courses.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, they would almost certainly fail you on any paper like this, and I would expect an ethics inquiry, honestly. Because I'm clearly being dishonest with my scholarship at that point.
Yeah.
Oh, Richard, I'm sorry. I don't mean to be disrespectful, but that's stupid.
Okay.
See what's happened? These guys have looked for missing links.
What's up?
It's a lie. It's a straw man. It's a lie.
Well, it's certainly a straw man of punctuated equilibrium. I'm sure Goldschmidt did say something like that because in the 1940s, people had silly ideas.
That slide is a lie. That slide has things on it that aren't true.
Absolutely true, yeah.
And he's using that as an argument, straw man argument.
Yeah. See, this is the reason why when people say, "Oh, do you think Kent is lying?" I go with, he absolutely does lie. I don't know if he believes the things that he says, like overall, like big picture. Like, does Kent believe in evolution? No, probably not. Does he think the Earth is 6,000 years old? Yeah, probably. But he also knows that he's lying to support it. He has to.
In the fossil record, they can't find any, and so they say, well, maybe evolution happened so fast it wasn't preserved. Maybe a reptile laid an egg and a bird hatched out.
No one thinks that right now.
Well, who did that bird marry?
I mean, okay, if we phrase it in a less stupid manner, who would the bird mate with?
It's always going to be funny to me. It's always going to be funny.
So if we go with who would such an animal mate with, that was one of the big objections raised to saltation in the first place. One of the reasons it never really caught on is because it required an already extremely improbable event to happen twice, and for the 2 resulting organisms in many cases to be of opposite sex and reproductively compatible. which is unlikely. And it's one of the reasons that saltation was abandoned pretty early on after it was proposed.
There's only about a zillion differences between a reptile and a bird. We'll get into that later sometime if we...
Actually, I would like Kent Hovind to ever name one difference between reptiles and birds. Because there are differences between birds and other reptiles, but birds are reptiles. I'm going to take a drink.
Yeah, Kent, name all the differences between mammals and people.
Yep, it's the exact same thing. It's like saying there are vast differences between mammals and apes. Like,
name all the differences between plants and carrots.
right. All you can do is list off things that are unique about carrots or humans or dinosaurs or birds or whatever. But listing the reasons that you're unique within a group does not remove you from the group, right? You can even do it with languages, right? So, for instance, French is the only Romance language to have such extensive final consonant loss in words that then reappear when the next word starts with a vowel in order to avoid subsequent vowels across words, which is a phonotactic restriction in French. That doesn't take French out of the Romance languages. It still maintains, you know, the relatively not fusional. Actually, no, it is. What is it? So it has the complex verbal system with conjugations. It maintains the definite articles derived from demonstrative pronouns in Latin. It still has a heavily Latin-based vocabulary. It still shares closer cognates with its close relatives like Occitan than it does with, say, Romanian, but even more, it shares vocabulary in common with even Romanian than it does with, say, Germanic languages or Hellenic language, or the Hellenic language, Greek. It remains a Romance language, even though it has unique features. So yeah, in every time you have a natural evolution, the various tips are all going to have uniquenesses about them, but that doesn't invalidate their presence within the wider group. And I'm sorry if you can hear a pigeon on my end, but there is a pigeon on the roof, and it's making cooing noises. So, here we go.
It might be a mourning dove, I can't tell.
Well, it's actually probably more... It doesn't sound like a mourning dove, but it probably is a dove. It's probably not actually a domesticated bird.
It's a dinosaur, though, we know that.
Yes.
time. But if they want to believe that, that's perfectly fine. Here's what happened. Charlie Darwin graduated from Bible college to be a preacher in the Anglican Church.
I mean...
in 1830.
He graduated from seminary with a theology degree, and that is one of the possible career directions he could have taken. But comparing a British seminary in the time of Charles Darwin to a modern American Bible college is a bit of a stretch. For instance, virtually no one in, say, the 19th century Britain was teaching young earth creationism because it hadn't been invented by the Seventh-day Adventists yet. So, yeah.
He couldn't get a job, so his dad...
Nope. He did not want a job as a clergyman.
Pulled a few strings and got him a job on board HMS Beagle.
Nope. The captain of the Beagle was looking around for a person to serve as both naturalist and captain's companion who was already well regarded within naturalist circles, and a friend of Darwin recommended him, as did most of the staff at the college he went to. And then Darwin's father was opposed to the idea and had to be convinced by his son-in-law, Darwin's brother-in-law, that it was a good idea. So I'm just going to take a drink now for this wildly, audaciously lying biography of Charles Darwin, which has nothing to do with anything, because even if it were true, it wouldn't change the facts of the matter about evolution.
Just more Kent demonstrating that he won't be honest.
Basically, yeah. When he could be. He didn't have to be dishonest about Charles Darwin, because none of his points depend on the biography of Charles Darwin.
When I didn't know any of this stuff, this is how I first started learning Kent is wrong. Because I could catch him on the stuff that I could check on.
Yeah.
And he'd be lying about it. Like, oh, he's got a pattern of that. Oh.
Mm-hmm.
That's the first, well, for me, it was one of the first steps.
Yeah.
He's going to sail around the world and collect bugs.
Oh, and birds and plants, as well as take copious notes.
And while he's sailing around, he stopped off at these islands right there called the Galapagos Islands. There on those islands, Charlie noticed there were 14 different varieties of finches.
Well, they were tanagers, but yeah.
Charlie studied the birds very carefully and said, you know what? I think all these birds had a common ancestor. I bet you're right, Charlie. It was a bird.
Specifically, it was a tanager, most closely related to the tanagers found on the west coast of South America. And yeah, that's what evolution would predict. So I've said this before in other Kent with Bents, but it bears repeating. Anytime you have an identifiable, nameable clade of organisms, the common ancestor of that group will be a member of that clade by definition. So the common ancestor of all mammals was a mammal. The common ancestor of all amniotes was an amniote. The common ancestor of all tetrapods was a tetrapod. The common ancestor of all sarcopterygians was a sarcopterygian. The ancestor of all osteichthyans was an osteichthyan, so on and so forth. And in case you didn't catch any of those, osteichthyans are the bony fish. Sarcopterygians are the lobe-finned fish. Tetrapods are the four-limbed land animals, like frogs and humans and lizards. And mammals, you guys know what mammals are. If you don't know what mammals are, this isn't the channel for you, because you probably should be watching something that goes over more basics. Which maybe I'll do. Do you think I should do something like that? Should I do like a, hey, what is a mammal anyway?
Maybe.
Maybe. I'll think about it. Tell me in the comments if you think that will be good content. Like maybe I can do like a kid-friendly thing or something, because I feel like mostly it would be kids who would have to have that education. I feel like most adults make it through school roughly knowing what a mammal is.
You know what Kent could benefit from is a course called, not even a course, one lesson called Introduction to Cladistics.
That would be nice.
And then Charlie said in his book on page 170, he said, it is a truly wonderful fact that all animals and all plants throughout all time and space should be related to each other. Hold on a minute.
Yeah, you're skipping over a whole lot more that he went over than just the tanagers, Kent. And I'm taking a drink because that's ridiculous. Look, I've read Origin of Species. It goes over a lot of things in a lot of detail. Now, Darwin gets plenty of things wrong in there because he was working, you know, over 100 years ago, and he did not have the evidence we have now. So some of the things he says we know now to be not true. But overall, he still maintains a pretty reasonable, you know, approximation of most aspects of the modern ideas behind evolution. And he goes through numerous lines of evidence, including plants, animals, different kinds of birds, all sorts of all sorts of stuff. And to think that Darwin based his entire idea just on Darwin's finches. Oh, drink from Mothra. That's completely crazy. It's based on far more than that. In fact, just the fact that he said this on page 170 means that he had a preceding 169 pages of stuff. And if you think they were all about the birds, I've got news for you. But let's see what else Ken has.
You see 14 kinds of birds, and you conclude that birds and bananas are related. That's stupid. You should conclude that those 14 kinds of birds had a common ancestor, but that's as far as it ever goes, folks, okay?
So here's the thing, right? The reason that it was significant that they all had a single common ancestor is because it showed that significant morphological change could occur over time, which resulted in a species going from one species with a single sort of, or at least a single mean around which, you know, morphology varies, then splitting into other species with significantly different morphologies. And the question is, can you trace that process back? If all of these tanagers are related, could all tanagers be related? If all tanagers are related, could all tanagers and finches be related? If all tanagers and finches are related, could all passerine or songbirds be related? If all passerine birds are related, could they also be related to, say, psittaciforms and falconiforms, the other sort of branch of neoaves with the parrots and the eagles and hawks and whatnot? Well, if all of those are related, could they also be related to Galloancerae with the chickens and the ducks and geese? And if those are related, could they also be related to paleognaths like the tinamou or the ostrich or the emu? And if all birds are related, are they also related to something else? What if they're related to crocodiles? Right? You just keep going farther back. And what Darwin realized is there's no obvious reason that you cannot keep going back all the way to a grouping all living things. So if you want to propose a reason you can't go back to all living things, but you can go back to, say, all tanagers, you need to give a reason why. And creation fails to do so, and it fails to give any criteria by which it even judges whether or not a group is related to another group.
I don't know of a kind way to say it, Charlie, but that's stupid. Okay, we don't ever see a bird produce a non-bird.
And no one is proposing that we ever will, and I'm taking a drink for...
That's stupid, Kent.
Yes.
The fact that you don't understand logic that badly that you just went there. Okay.
I think you're getting actually legit angry at Kent Hovind right now.
He knows better. No, maybe he didn't then, but he probably did.
Oh, I think he knew better even at this point.
He probably did.
He's had enough debates by this point that have had people carefully explain things to him that he knows better.
Yeah, he knows better.
See, dogs produce dogs, and you might get quite a variety of dogs. Roses produce roses. That is called microevolution.
Actually, it's called monophyly, but okay.
Now that is a fact, folks. It happens. It is observable. It is scientific. I don't think we ought to use that word, microevolution. We should just call it a variation. But they use it, so just so I qualify that, it's a lousy term. It gives what's called a free rider effect to the rest of the 5 religious ideas of evolution. You might get a big dog or a little dog, but you're always going to get a dog when you crossbreed your dogs.
That, first of all, that is kind of adorable, because I like that we're using, like an adult giant dog with a tiny little baby chihuahua. Like, yeah, it's kind of adorable. But anyway, yes, all those things are true, so I'll take a drink for getting it right technically. But they're also exactly what we should expect. Nothing unusual has occurred here, even if evolution is true. We should not expect roses to produce dogs.
And I would go so far as to say probably the dog, the wolf, and the coyote had a common ancestor. This Irish textbook shows different dogs, and it calls it divergent evolution. Oh, come on, giving it a fancy name doesn't change a thing. It is still
what, Kent? What Kent, just random speculation is good science.
Yeah. Well, and it raises the question, okay, well, why...
No testable theories for him, no predictions. He just kind of, I bet it's this. That's it.
And let's say the dog, the wolf, and the coyote have a common ancestor. Okay, well, what about the jackal? I mean, it's in the same genus. It can breed with the wolf and the coyote. So Kent will probably say yes. But then we go just a little bit outside that. What about the dhole? The only big difference morphologically between the dhole, which is a wild dog that you can find in like East Central Asia. There's like Tibet, parts of India, Mongolia, things like that, right? It has a different number of mammary glands and a different tooth count. But otherwise, it's almost identical to genus Canis. Is that the same kind? What about foxes? They're just kind of outside that group, right? Did they have a common ancestor? And if at any point you say no, then you have to explain why, but Kent never will. He'll only give you examples of things that he thinks could reasonably be related. He'll never tell you why he thinks the next closest thing isn't. And I've seen him be asked about it. Aaron Ra asked him that on a Non Sequitur show, back when that was a thing. And yeah, he just dodged every single time. And he still dodges to this day.
Right.
a dog. And a 3-year-old can tell you. Anybody in here 5 years old? Who's 5 years old? 5 years old. What's your name? Misty. Here we have a dog, a wolf, a coyote, and a banana. Which one is not like the others? Dog, wolf, coyote, and banana. Banana. All right, let's give Misty a hand. Very good.
Well, good job, Misty. And you are correct. That is the odd one out. But here's the thing. Let's say that we added to this picture, right, a bear. The banana remains the odd one out, right?
Sure.
But what if we take the banana out?
Then what's the odd one out?
It's the bear. But let's say that we then add in a fox. Then the bear is the odd one out still. Okay. But once we remove the fox, what's the odd one out? Oh, sorry, we remove that, and then we remove the bear, and the fox becomes the odd one out. And then let's say we remove that, and the coyote becomes the odd one out, because wolves and dogs are in the same species, whereas Canis latrans is its own species, and it's much less closely related to each other than dogs and wolves are. Okay, so why is it that we can say the coyote is the odd one out, and then the fox is the odd one out, then the bear is the odd one out, and then the banana? Does that mean that bears and dogs are related? Kent doesn't think so. I've heard him say he disagrees that canids and ursids are related.
Because he speculates that doesn't make sense to him.
Right, but that's the thing.
No other reason other than
you have to be able to give a reason for why you're drawing the line where you do, and creationists never can.
He doesn't understand what science is when he says he loves science.
Oh yeah,
science he's done.
What Kent Hovind likes are bits of trivia primarily about physics, right? That's why he likes to do things like show kids the quote-unquote scientific way to make a paper airplane, or why at Dinosaur Adventureland they have a plasma ball.
You know what Kent loves is memorizing what page he's going to misquote.
Well, there's that too.
He's so when he says that's on page 170, he's got that smudginess on his face. I'm just kidding, but he does seem to make that seem like it's really important. Like, look, I'm smart. I know what page this is on.
Which is ultimately the least important aspect, right?
And it is. It's so trivial.
Yeah.
Who cares what the page is? But it's subconsciously telling his audience, "Hey, look, I'm smart. I know what I'm talking about."
Yeah. So here,
you're also misquoting it, though.
In a real, actual intellectual pursuit, the things that's most important are, one, knowing the concepts that are involved in coming to the right answer, and two, knowing where to get the evidence that your conclusion is supported by both the concepts and the particulars that you need to fact. Knowing off the top of your head what all the references aren't important. That's why when people actually do things like literature surveys and whatnot, when they find citations that they need, they write them down somewhere and then go reference that document and double check to see if it's the right citation. You don't get people writing papers that have all of their citations locked up in their head. And if you think you do, go ask Gutsig Gibbon, who just recently, by the way, submitted her master's thesis. So congratulations to Erica. We're all hoping for a A. She's just hoping it passes. I think it'll do better than pass. But, whatever. So yeah, ask her. Ask her on one of her next streams whether or not she can remember all of the citations for her actual academic work that's actually going towards a degree. Something, by the way, Kent Hovind has never actually done. So, yeah. Here we go.
The other ones. Some of these college professors can't tell.
This has got to be the most friendly audience I've ever seen Kent Hovind have. They laugh at every single one of his stupid jokes. I do not get it.
Look, there's a variety of dogs, folks, and they probably had a common ancestor. It was a dog.
Yep.
Okay? It's just a dog. See, variations happen within the dog kind. You get a big dog or a little dog, but there are limits to these variations. Haven't the farmers been trying to breed for bigger pigs for a long time? They try to get the biggest pig they can, don't they? Do you think they'll ever get a pig as big as Texas?
No, but they've gotten pigs with different vertebra and rib counts in a very short period of time. So, I mean, that's something. And the thing is, no one is trying to get a pig as big as Texas because it's physically impossible. What Kent Hovind is doing here is saying that there are rules to physics and chemistry which preclude certain organisms. Therefore, evolution cannot create organisms which are not precluded by physics and chemistry. It's completely irrelevant. It's like saying...
argument.
Yeah. It's basically...
more of a red herring than a strong one.
It ultimately comes down to this. If you can't bake a cake the size of Texas, you can't bake a cake the size of, I don't know, a chessboard. Like, no, that's not how that works. Or you can't vary the size of cakes at all if you can't bake a cake the size of Texas.
Yeah, that makes more sense. You can't.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah.
The size, you can't vary the if it's a chocolate cake or vanilla or whatever.
Simply because there's no oven as big as Texas.
Because you can't make a cake as big as Texas, right?
But that doesn't follow.
I bet there's a limit.
You should never predicted that there will be a pig or any animal as big as Texas.
Yeah, it's physically impossible. Like
I don't know the papers out there that are predicting that.
Yeah, no one is claiming it.
And there somewhere, isn't there? Mm-hmm. Roaches become resistant to pesticides after a while. Do you think they'll ever become resistant to a sledgehammer? I bet there's a limit.
No, probably not. Because again, drink again.
I could see a roach becoming large enough to be you know, and however long cockroaches evolve to be humongous, and a sledgehammer doesn't do much to them.
Maybe,
Possibility.
but even if it's not, all that means is that there's a physical limit to the structural integrity of certain biochemicals. That's it. Like, I don't think any roach is ever going to evolve into Superman where you can shoot guns at it and it's going to be just fine. Like, but all that means is that there are physical limits to the biochemistry available for life. Like, Wolverine's adamantium bones aren't an option for cockroaches, because that's a thing that doesn't exist. Not really a problem for actual evolution.
Yeah, okay. They still produce the same kind of plant or animal. That's not evolution. That's just a variation of the same kind. Okay.
Nope, it's just monophyly.
Okay, and the information for that variety was already present in the gene pool. No new information is ever added.
Wrong. So we actually know of many cases in which new information is added to the gene pool. So one common mechanism is gene duplication, right? So if you have a gene that's duplicated, you now have 2 copies of it, which both make the same protein. But that means that if one changes, it can take on a new function, but the original gene is still there, and so you have a brand new gene with a brand new protein, as well as the original protein and the original gene. If that isn't new information, I can't imagine what would be, but of course creationists are always oddly hesitant to actually define information. I wonder why. Probably because any definition they give it that's actually rigorous and measurable would lead to the obvious measurement that new information has in fact come into the genome. So, yeah.
The dogs or the pigs don't learn to fly or become pink.
Well, actually, it wouldn't take all that much to make a dog pink. In fact, I'll bet if you had a white dog and you fed it a rather excessive amount of, say, shellfish, like crustaceans, you could probably get a pink dog. Because one of the things about hair and feathers is they're actually one of the places that your body excretes waste material. Now, not the terribly bad for you waste material. That tends to be excreted in feces or urine because it needs to get away from you as fast as possible. Which, by the way, is one of the reasons urine therapy is dumb. Your body is desperately trying to get rid of those chemicals. You shouldn't re-ingest them. You're just going to make your kidneys hurt. But anyway, that's one of the reasons you can do a drug test with hair, right? So if you pull out the hair with the follicle, you can actually get tests for certain drugs that are hard to test for in, say, blood or urine. In fact, Benson and I know someone who happened to know how drug tests work with hair and managed to, let's just say, use that to his advantage. I don't want to say too much about that. But, yeah. Anyway, but yeah, that's one of the reasons you can do that. And it's why certain animals, like flamingos, are pink. They're actually taking in reddish pigments from the crustaceans that they're eating as the main part of their diet. And then, because their body doesn't need them for anything, they get put onto the feather. The same thing can happen with hair. So actually, I would say that if you got a white dog and you fed it like a lot of crab and shrimp, you might actually manage to get it pink. Now, I don't know for certain, but...
Okay, there's no new information added, just...
Oh, and with flight, yes, dogs and pigs are both extremely unsuited to flight. However, interestingly enough, we have things that are close to flying that are arboreal mammals, like sugar gliders, flying squirrels, and colugos, which all have in common with bats flaps of skin connecting their fingers and their wrists to their ankles. Which, interestingly, is another adaptation that we also see in other flighted tetrapods, or gliding tetrapods, such as Yi-Chi, a dinosaur, which had very unique wings that were supported by 2 fingers and an extended carpal bone, as well as in pterosaurs, which had a wing supported by 1 finger, and then a patagium stretches from that finger, including the wrist, and then down to the ankle. Well, the exact attachment of the posterior end of the patagium is a little bit controversial, most likely the ankle. But either way, yeah, you see that just stretching flaps of skin helps with this. And given how skin develops, where it basically develops between everything, and then later on the skin has to be told to die in order to separate things like fingers or wrists from ankles and between flaps of skin, not sending that signal is not a crazy, mutation that is so impossible. So yes, in fact, in animals that are already in a situation where flight would be an advantageous thing, and their limbs are already designed in such a way that webbing would assist them in gliding, or even just parachuting. You get that. You can even see it in other groups like frogs. There are flying frogs that use the webbing between their fingers, just like a bat or a pterosaur.
That's crazy.
I know.
Scrambled information. And the gene pool of the new variety is now more limited than before.
Well, then in that case, what we should see is a steady decline in genetic variation as you go forward in time. But the thing is, we can sample organisms from the last, 10-ish thousand years, and we don't see any significant degradation. And further, if you were to go back in the fossil record, you should see more variation within species than we see today. But we don't. In fact, Tyrannosaurus is a notoriously diverse species. Every new find is a completely unique animal. It's not the same size or shape as any of the other finds.
Somebody spent years crossbreeding dogs to develop a Chihuahua.
That's true. Take a drink. There's probably a lot of someone's, but that's close enough.
All that work to make a dog that is 100% useless.
Oh, good, your headphones are in, so Carmen didn't hear that, right? Carmen is Ben's Chihuahua. Is she around?
She's around somewhere. I don't know. She's 100% useless, apparently, so what does it matter, right?
Well, yeah, that's a good point. Carmen, you're around? She's around somewhere.
Carmen! She's pretending she can't hear me, so she's trying to
She likes to pretend not to hear you.
Sometimes.
Yeah. All right. Anyway. But also, here's the thing. Chihuahuas were, in fact, bred as companion animals. They were not bred as working dogs. But you know what humans like?
Companion animals?
Yeah, that is a useful function. There's a reason that people with pets, especially dogs and cats, have better health outcomes and life perspectives and better mental health and things like that. It's because having an animal to hang out with is good for you. It basically is sort of like a proxy for human interaction. It just gives you more of the social interaction that you need to be a healthy, functioning human, right? Now, can it completely replace human contact? No, but it's supplemental.
Let's turn all the Chihuahuas in the world loose back into the woods. How long would they last?
Not very long.
They'd run up to the wolf. Yep, 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 yep. Crunch.
Yay, Kent and his audience want to kill all the Chihuahuas in the world. That's hilarious.
Well, so... Oh! Drink. Alright, what I'm going to do is I'm going to be right back, but for the audience, there's going to be no time gap, because since this is pre-recorded, I can simply pause. Or not pause, but cut. There you go. I can simply cut. Cut. Alright, and we are back. So thank you for waiting through that entire instantaneous process. Here we go.
Go ahead, make my day. Useless dog. Genetic information was lost when you got your variation. It wasn't added.
Why? So I want to know what the logic is behind Chihuahuas have less genetic information than wolves. Because the only thing I can think of is that Kent Hovind thinks that size equals genetic information.
I think number of chromosomes matters a lot to him for no reason.
But wolves and Chihuahuas have the same number of chromosomes. And he's claiming here that Chihuahuas have less information than wolves. So does that mean that Shaquille O'Neal has more genetic information than Danny DeVito?
I don't know, and I also don't know if the most whatever common ancestor that Kent thinks was on the Ark each one of them had just a tremendous amount of genetic information.
Presumably.
They've slowly been releasing over time and losing until the point where there's no genetic information left.
But the thing is, according to the flood narrative, most animals which aren't clean could only have up to 4 alleles per locus, which means ultimately we now have more information in modern quote-unquote kinds of the kinds that Kent has identified, like horses, dogs, and cats, than could have come off the Ark. So information had to be added because we have too much of it now for 2 animals to come off the ark with that much genetic information. So, yeah, all of this, like, the analogy doesn't work and the consequences don't work.
Satan is using math to try and trick us.
Maybe.
By math working the way it's supposed to work.
Satan invented math. You heard it here first, folks. Let's take a drink for this nonsense.
Is that what Kent's arguing?
I don't think it's what it's arguing, but it's sort of like...
The idea is that, you have to just throw out these fundamental rules of math.
Right.
To accept what he wants. Well, I don't feel comfortable doing that. That seems like it's intellectually dishonest.
You feel like...
I don't think that's acting on faith either.
So, are you saying that you don't think Satan is behind math?
No, I don't think Satan is behind math.
Wow. Shows what you know, man.
It does show what I know, because I could be wrong. Maybe Satan is behind math.
I guess it's not something we should rule out.
I'll be at the pearly gates, and God will be like, well, I'll let you in, because you're saved and all, but just so you know, Satan did invent math. It's not real, and all that stuff you learned was wrong. Kent was right after all. It's weird that he kept lying, though. Like, I can't imagine the conversation. Like, how would that go in Kent's favor?
I don't know. Oh, okay.
You might have selected a certain slice of the gene pool with small dog, quick characteristics, but you didn't add anything. You selected.
But small dog isn't a thing that you can find in the gene pool, right?
So a small gene selection, which I think is what he was implying there.
So the way that genes determine adult size in animals is basically by telling the animal how long and how quickly to grow. But basically, it's sort of like saying, okay, is it more or less information to say to someone, drive 30 miles at 10 miles an hour? Is that more or less information than saying, drive 4 miles at 2 miles an hour? Which one of those is more information? Exactly. You're specifying the same amount of complexity. You're just saying, do a thing more or less and faster or slower. There isn't a separate gene that says big dog.
I do think Kent is implying that he thinks that the size of a creature is based on the number of chromosomes, the way he's phrasing what he's saying.
Maybe, but then he would have to conclude that chihuahuas have fewer chromosomes than wolves. Do you think he thinks that?
He has to. If wolves are their ancestor, they had to have lost information to become chihuahuas. Yeah, he thinks that.
He might.
That's what he's saying, right? That's why the most common, or the most distant common ancestor that Kent would believe in, which would have come from the Ark, must have had a whole lot of genetic information.
And just tons and tons of chromosomes?
Losing over time as other variations with Kent's kind.
But the thing is, in other places, I've heard Kent use variation in chromosome count as reasons why two things can't be related.
I'm not saying Kent's being consistent with his own line of reasoning that he's argued.
Oh, okay.
That. I'm just saying that's the way how he's been phrasing this, it seems like that's what he was implying.
Okay.
Something from the pop.
It's not correct.
No, it's not.
I come from Illinois, corn country. There are so many kinds of corn up there, they have to number them. You'll be driving down the highway, you'll see BX65, don't mix it up with XL29, something will blow up.
I think that was just a joke, but it's not true, but anyway.
But I'll tell you what, folks, you can crossbreed your corn from now till the cows come home, and you always get corn.
Yep.
Yeah,
you will never get it.
Evolution continues to teach. Okay, great.
Are we just going to have to take a drink every time the response is supposed to be monophily?
He keeps saying the same thing, though. I'm not taking a drink for every example of him saying the same thing every time. I could just...
And it's always been stupid every time he said it.
Yeah.
Hamster or tomato or a whale to grow on that corn stalk, okay? It won't happen.
That's true. I'll take a drink technically.
They probably had a common ancestor. It was a cow.
Yep.
Variety of horses, no question. Probably the zebra and the horse had a common ancestor. But
when I first saw this, and this is completely unrelated, but when I first saw this, it was on a much smaller screen, and I thought that the horse here labeled caballo because for some reason this is in Spanish. He just grabbed a Mexican textbook for some reason.
Mexican textbook is the label we put on it. Mexican textbook.
And so, but when I first saw this, I thought that horse was like a musculature drawing, and I was like, Why do they draw the horse without skin and everything else
That's
with
what
skin?
I thought until you just said that.
But yeah, no, it's just a red horse. It took me an embarrassingly long time to figure that one out. I was so confused. But yeah, so what does it say down there? So it says figure 811. It is believed that the zebras, the donkeys, and the horses resulted from the divergence from divergence of a common ancestor or from a common ancestor. Pleohippus. I don't know what tiburon.
Dolphin.
What? So Pleohippus, the dolphin, ichthyosaurs illustrate convergence. Yeah. What is tiburon? I don't know that word. I don't know. Let me know in the comments if you know what that word is. I'll probably look it up later, but my Spanish is not up to the task of completely reading every single word in this. But that's the only one I didn't know. So it's pretty good for having never studied Spanish other than like a few days on Duolingo here and there. Oh, drink from Mothra.
Kids are going to be taught in school tomorrow in your town that the horse used to have 4 toes. Well, there's some things they don't tell the kids about this Eohippus to Equus series, which has been proven wrong 50 years ago, but still is in your textbooks right here in this town. They don't tell them the originals.
In 1991.
Yeah, although to be fair, this consensus hasn't changed too much since then.
So-called horse is the size of a fox. It was a meat eater.
Oh, drink. Okay, first, Eohippus was not a meat eater. It was a low grazer / like low browser. It was sort of a generalist herbivore that was more into grazing than it was browsing, and it was nearly identical to the the rhinos of the time, which were more into grazing than browsing, or other way around. Sorry, more into browsing than grazing. So it was definitely not a meat eater. They give you a 38 centimeter size, right? So why is it that they don't want you to know that it's the size of a fox? Do you have to compare it to some canid of similar size in order for the size to be okay? We have a size here. Also, 18 pairs of ribs. If that becomes a problem, I'm going to have something to say about it.
And had 18 pairs of ribs. The next one had 15 pairs of ribs.
Okay, so you know how Kent liked to talk about the fact that goodness. Take a drink for Mothra.
Pigs and rib counts?
So yeah, the pigs, one of the reasons that modern pigs have different sizes that have been bred into them that Kent acknowledges is because pigs have different numbers of ribs. So if in fact, not all horses, drink for Godzilla. So I lost my train of thought. Right. So if pigs can have different rib counts, and that's okay for Kent, then guess what, Kent? Rib count variations don't matter for fossil equids either. It's okay.
Couple of trips through the buzzsaw.
Oh yeah, and my goodness, Godzilla. We're getting absolutely inundated by kaiju right now. I don't really know why. But anyway. Right, so modern horses don't all have the same rib numbers. There's variation in modern Equus caballus, the horse, in rib count. You can, in fact, humans vary in rib count. Some humans have an extranumerary rib. It's just a thing.
I did that, and then it miraculously grew back 19 pairs of ribs as it evolved, and then...
No, because again, rib counts vary within species. There are no barrier for evolution between species.
Back to 18.
Okay.
They also don't tell them the whole thing's been proven wrong a long time ago.
They shouldn't tell them, because that's not a thing that happened.
Like this guy says in the biology textbook, other examples like the gradual evolution of the horse have not held up under close examination.
Well, in fact, what is actually happening, and if I remember correctly from this book, because I have looked into this before, it's not so much that the gradual evolution of the horse didn't add up, it's that the orthogenetic evolution of the horse didn't show up. Now, orthogenetic is probably not one of those words that's in everybody's vocabulary, I'm going to go out on a limb and say, Bent, you probably don't know what that word is. Yeah. So orthogenesis was this idea that was popular in the early 20th century about evolution, where it was basically that, drink from Mothra, where it was basically that various organisms had evolutionary trajectories, right? So there would be, like, the idea was that deer are on this trajectory towards bigger and bigger antlers. They're just on that direction. And eventually they might grow antlers that are so big that they just go extinct. And then horses were just on a trajectory to just lose toes. They were just all going to lose their toes, no matter how they diverged or diversified. And the thing is that this has been roundly rejected by now. And so it is true that our textbooks will sometimes present horse evolution as overly orthogenetic, where you have a single lineage going from small four-toed to large one-toed, which is not an accurate representation of what actually happened in the fossil record. You should get a branching tree where you have to trace one particular line and skip over all these little branches that you could have followed in order to get from a small four-toed browser to the large one-toed, or sorry, small four-toed grazer to the large one-toed grazer of today, right? You have to skip over a lot of these branching points. But it is not true that these transitionals do not represent transitional morphologies between the ancestral horses and modern horses. They do.
That's a polite way of saying it's proven wrong, okay?
No.
This G.G. Simpson, back in 1950, said the example of the horse family has been unintentionally falsified. They knew 50 years ago.
And not to be really orthogenetic? What did I just talk about? I'm taking a drink for prediction. I'm counting it as a prediction. And of course, Kent, while putting the word orthogenetic up there, didn't bother to say it.
No, why would he?
Yeah. So yes, I agree. Back in 1950, it was fairly well established that horses were not orthogenetic. Because they're not. Nothing is. Orthogenesis is BS.
Oh, this was false. Why did they keep that in your textbooks? This whole thing was made up by Othniel C. Marsh in 1874. He picked animals from all over the world.
Nope. Horse evolution occurred primarily in North America, and all stages of horse evolution can be traced in North America. Then, during the most recent glacial period, horses spread out into Asia, and then from there into Africa. And yeah, that is how we got the old world horses. They subsequently went extinct in North America, and there you go.
And put them in order the way he thought it might have happened. They were never found in that order.
They actually kind of were, though.
Modern horses are found in the same layers as the so-called ancient equus.
Not entirely. However, there is overlap between different morphologies in horses, because again, that's how we know it wasn't orthogenetic. That's part of that whole thing.
Abiohippus horse. They're found in the same layer. So it can't be the ancestor, that's for sure.
Nope. This is the exact same point as if humans evolved from monkeys, why are there still monkeys? It's because there are still niches available for monkeys, and not all monkeys evolved into the same organisms. There's a branching tree. Only one branch of monkey ended up going all the way human, and all along the way, from the common ancestor of all monkeys to humans, there were branches splitting off. Every single branch would then itself split off into more branches until one tiny little twig out on one periphery is humans. Then everything else are the non-human monkeys. Now today, we only have a subset of original equid variety, right? We only have the one-toed, relatively large animals left. But the fact that at previous times in geological history, there was a wider diversity of equidae isn't exactly like shocking or unpredicted. And that's all that's happening here, is you're seeing more diversity in equidae in the past than is currently present.
The ancient horse is nothing but a Hyracotherium, which is still alive today.
No. No, so the Hyrax and the Hyracotherium are quite different. In fact, should we give examples of both?
I'm not going to.
All right, I'll tell you what. I will. Here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to make a quick video. It'll come out at some point on the channel, and I'll link to it in this, comparing a Hyrax and the Hyracotherium, And we'll see if they're the same. Spoiler alerts, no, they're extremely different. Yeah, I know. This is basically, they're about as different as any two mammals could be. Humans are about as similar to elephants as horses are to as Hyracotherium is to the Hyrax. Yeah.
By the way, the ribs, the toes, the teeth are very different in these animals. In
Yeah, between the Hyrax and the Hyracotherium, you're right.
South America, the fossils go exactly backwards.
They don't. I've looked into this claim. They just don't.
Hold on. Number 3. Okay, pretend you don't know anything about any of this, right? Like me. You're coming in, just reading number 3. The Hyracotherium is just like the Hyrax. Then the next thing. Oh, but their ribs and toes and teeth are different.
Yeah.
Are they like each other or are they different, Ken?
I think what he's talking about is the Hyracotherium, sorry, and the modern horse. The other thing is, we don't have a South American horse fossil lineage.
Oh, I see.
Yeah. There are no South American three-toed horses. There is another group of ungulates in South America whose name escapes me, but I feel like I should know it. What is it? Lepidoptera. Is it Lepidoptera? Oh. No, that's what am I thinking of? Okay, hold on. Because that was butterflies. I'm gonna find out. Because I cannot remember it and it bugs me. I think there's an L in there. Is it Meridional ungulata? Oh, I'm thinking of Lepidoptera now. What I'm really thinking of is Nodo ungulata. So there were Nodo ungulates from South America, which convergently evolved to be swift-running, one-toed hoofed animals. They were already ungulates, which means they were already running on hooves. But then another group of South American ungulates evolved into essentially, fake horses, and then went extinct before humans ever got there. So there are no South American horses. Well, I mean, there are now, but there aren't any in the fossil record.
Instead of three-toed to one-toed, it goes one-toed to three-toed in the.
And nope, it doesn't. I've already looked. I've asked paleontologists on this. What happens is there is a less clear temporal ordering of these particular fossils in Nodo ungulata than there is in, say, Equidae in North America. And primarily that's because of just gaps in the fossil record overall. Like there are time periods in the fossil record of South America that in certain environments just don't seem to be preserved at all. And as a result, you get members of certain groups, like this group that had a one-toed member, but because there's existing diversity within the group, you get multiple stages that look like the various sort of karyotypes of the ancestral group or ancestors of the one-toed animal.
Fossil order. They won't talk about that much, but you check it out. That's a fact, folks. They're never found in the order presented in the textbooks. Three-toed and one-toed gray side by side. Plenty of information on the internet about that. Tulsa Zoo finally took out their display because so many folks complain, why do you have this horse evolution display in the zoo?
I mean, look, if you go bug some zoo director, well, why don't you take out this horse display? You're just being a jerk. And frankly, the fact that it eventually was taken out because people who don't know anything about what they're talking about basically harassed a zoo is not a sign of great accomplishment. You didn't get anything done there. You went backwards.
Been proven wrong 50 years ago. Take it out. And you folks ought to get together with your school board and say, look, on page whatever it is, 952 of our textbook, it says the horse evolved from a four-toed ancestor. Let's cut this page out. If you had a page in your textbook teaching the kids the earth was flat, would it be okay to demand that that page be removed?
No. Why would you keep using that textbook? You would get a new textbook. That's ridiculous.
I would just ignore that page because it's stupid.
Well, I mean, there's that. But, like, if you were a school board member and you found out that the textbook you approved said the earth was flat, it would be time to find a new publisher, not just a new textbook.
You don't have to buy a whole new book.
Yeah, you kind of do.
Why not, Kent?
You kind of do, because everything else in that book is now very suspect, and you should not be giving your money to textbook publishers that publish that the Earth is flat. Although, ironically, a subsect of what Kent Hovind's audience was at this time have come on board with the flat Earth. In fact, I've seen flat Earth discussion groups talking about how much they love Kent Hovind, but they wish he would just figure out the whole flat Earth thing, which is hilarious.
Just cut the page out. It won't cost the school anything. How many of you would volunteer to help cut the pages out and bring your own scissors? See?
I don't own scissors. Well, I guess I have kitchen scissors. Do those count?
Yes.
Okay.
Won't cost them a dime.
Cut paper, sure.
What's up?
If I cut paper, then yeah.
I don't know. I've never actually tried to cut paper with them. I cut like kimchi and bacon with them.
Yeah.
Which are much more delicious than paper.
That's true.
And you send me your book and I'll show you which pages need to be taken out. I've read hundreds of them. I can find them like that. Free of charge. I'll donate my time. Peabody Museum still has the horse evolution on display.
Good for the Peabody Museum. Because it hasn't been proven wrong. Someone saying that the evolution of horses wasn't orthogenetic is not the same as science accepting that horses didn't evolve. Like, I guess an analogy that might work for some people here is like, the fact that you can't ride a pogo stick to the moon doesn't mean the moon landings are fake.
Does Kent Hovind think that evolutionists are just baffled by how the horse exists, but they think they have everything else figured out? They just won't acknowledge horses.
I honestly cannot get inside Kent Hovind's brain because
I always try to.
I know, and I would like to too, but I can't imagine holding the positions that Kent Hovind claims to, nor can I imagine being dishonest enough to be able to say all of them. So I cannot get inside his brain. I don't know. I mean, he has a sort of brain of someone who might like not respond to a lawsuit and then pretend that he wasn't living where he lived and forge documents for the court to pretend that he lived there and then get caught for it. That's the same kind of mindset that Kent Hovind has.
As I stood, I've been there many times. Makes my blood boil every time I walk in that place.
Oh.
I'm standing there looking at this lie proven wrong 50 years ago while hundreds of kids come through in school groups. The kids are never told, well, this has been proven wrong, boys and girls.
Because it wasn't.
Because it wasn't.
They asked the folks at the Tulsa Zoo before they took the display down, they said, why don't you take this display down? The zoo director said, we don't have the funding to remove it.
So what that sounds like to me is a zoo director who just doesn't want to deal with these morons.
Or a thing that didn't happen.
Well, yeah, it could be a thing that didn't happen, but I can picture a zoo director being harassed by a bunch of creationists who don't know what they're talking about, and then being like, oh, it's just on the budget, just go away. So that he doesn't have to say, because what he should have said is, no, you people are all idiots. This accurate description of horse evolution is staying up. If you want it taken down, buy the zoo. That's what he should have said.
Yeah, who knows what he actually said. If it happened at all.
Well, if it happened at all, that's what he should have said. And I can imagine why he would say what Kent Hovind says he said.
I've got all the letters back and forth on that. Man.
Make them public, Kent. You could cite them. You could publish them. You could scan them.
Man. Folks, there's quite a variety of horses today, okay? There's big horses and little horses. I was in Baton Rouge, Louisiana a few months ago. Got to see where they raise the 30-inch tall horses.
Okay.
I mean, my dog's bigger than that.
But do the small horses have less information, Kent?
What do you do with a 30-inch horse?
You put it on display as a novelty item. I mean, it's pretty obvious. It's similar to what the deal is with the Chihuahua. It's not useful in the direct economic production of some good or in rooting out some kind of pest or something. It's fun, and humans like fun, and fun is therefore useful to humans. I'm really tired of people pretending that things like literature and entertainment and companionship aren't useful things for humans.
Right.
Look at it, I guess that's about it. And it's
Yeah, that's a thing. That's why people own peacocks, Kent. Looking at things that are fun to look at is useful.
That's why people pay money to go to zoos, Kent.
Right. It hurts my brain when Kent just is like, oh, well, you know, if it's not pulling a plow, it doesn't matter. I'm just going to take a drink for Kent Hovind being like, Oh, I'm sorry, humans. You're not allowed to have fun.
For $10,000. Sucker born every minute, I guess. But one lady wrote me a letter and said, Mr. Hovind, we crossbreed zebras, ponies, horses, and mules. Not mules, the jackass. And we raise zonkies, zorses, zeonies. They cross every which way.
Okay.
Well, that's probably because they're the original same kind.
Okay, so if they can't breed, they're not the same kind. Got it.
No problem there. You want to see all the fatal flaws in the horse evolution. So,
okay, well, I guess he's not going to talk about that. So what we're going to do is we're going to talk about that a little bit, and then we're going to call it here at Icons of Evolution. And, yeah, there you go. And we will, well, I'll do my closing stuff later. So here's the thing. Now, there aren't really great examples of completely true ring species, but there are species complex where very distant organisms in the species complex can't breed. Kent Hovind will talk about it, right? So for instance, Kent Hovind likes to talk about the fact that Arctic hares and hares down in Florida can't interbreed. But the neighboring populations all across that extent, which is just unbroken land, can breed, right? So Florida rabbits can breed with, say, Alabama rabbits or South Carolina rabbits or Georgia rabbits or whatever, right? And they can breed with, like, Minnesota rabbits and Wisconsin rabbits. And they can breed with, like, Saskatchewan rabbits, right? And they can breed with, like, Alaska rabbits. And I know I'm skipping steps here in the progress, right? Who cares? So, but here's the thing. If the intermediate rabbits were to go extinct, you would have, or hares, I guess it started with hares, it doesn't matter. So if the intermediate hares went extinct, you would have two populations that now can't interbreed. Does that mean that they now establish two kinds? According to Kent Hovind's definition, yes. But Kent Hovind won't stick with that, because he will say if they can breed, then they're in the same kind, but if they can't, then maybe they're in the same kind, but maybe not. Which basically means this definition is useless, because while it could confirm two organisms as being in the same kind, what we need is a way to disconfirm a hypothesis that two organisms are in the same kind. Otherwise, it's unfalsifiable.
And that matters, even though some people don't understand why.
Yeah, so here's one of the things about science. If you can't tell if you're wrong, there's no way to know if you're right. So you need to be able to, at least in principle, show that your idea is wrong. So in a recent, actually I guess it was in an after show that I did after debate. So I did a Flat Earth debate. It was my first ever Flat Earth debate. I don't know if I'll ever do another one. It was frustrating, but it was sort of fun overall. I mean, I enjoyed the time there. Part of that might have been the mead that I drank, because it was very nice. But it's actually one of the best meads I've had in a long time. And I don't have meads too often, but I've had a good variety of them. Anyway, that's not relevant. But in the after show, when Flat Earth Aussie Roscoe was talking about how he thinks that it's a possibility that giants mined out the Grand Canyon. So the Grand Canyon is a quarry, melted all that rock, and turned it into the hollow, lighter-than-air moon that he thinks is the moon. When I said, okay, what observation would show to you that that idea is wrong? Couldn't come up with a single thing. Yeah. Or when I said to Otangelo after our debate, what would it take to show you that irreducible complexity is not a good argument? Because to me, any single irreducibly complex organ that can be shown to evolve falsifies it. And he said, oh, well, that just means it wasn't irreducibly complex. It's like, okay, so irreducible complexity is always able to shift the goalpost. Well, then it's not scientific, and it's a useless idea, because you can't ever tell if it's true.
If you find a link, it's no longer a missing link,
right,
and people won't talk about it.
But now you have two links in the middle, which actually means Dr. Banjo time. All right, well, now that we're back from Dr. Banjo, yeah. So these are all problems with pseudoscience, where you have problems with things like falsifiability, which is an important part of science. However, I think we're going to close it up there. I know this has gone a little bit shorter, but that's okay. Thank you, anyone who might have super chatted or anything like that. I can't tell. I suspect Kerry Bronson might have, because he's always going to get in that donation to the void, lest the void cast him out. Bent, do you have anything you want to tell everyone before we sign off?
Nah, I'm good.
All right. I'm not entirely sure exactly which day this is going to air, but do tune in on Thursday. There will be a video. I think if this airs the day I think it will, that it will be the Speculative Evolution update. So that will be Phase 3, Update 3. And I have a lot of organisms to get through for Phase 3, so guys, get ready. Phase 3 is going to last a long time. But anyway, either way, thank you very much for watching. Make sure you hit like and subscribe. I want to take a little time to thank my channel members and patrons, especially those pledging $20 or more. Bob Knob, Bent Hovind, Ian Chen, Chris Love, Sphincter of Doom, The Venerable Bede, Patrick Dennis, and Res Instance. YouTube is a very volatile platform, what with fraudulent copyright claims, demonetization, and the ever-decreasing share of ad revenue on the platform. It is very hard to rely on YouTube. My members and patrons help keep this channel going, and without them, the channel wouldn't exist. If you'd like to join my Patreon, the link is in the description, and if you'd like to become a channel member, that link is below the video. It's the join button here on YouTube. Either way, you'll get access to early videos, an exclusive Discord server, and if you pledge enough, 3D assets you can use in your own projects.